Hey, what's up? It's your girl Nique, and you're tuned in to Nique at Night. And tonight we're going to be talking about an HIV positive softball player who intentionally gave HIV to several women and has now been put behind bars for 6 years because of it.
For tonight, a Nashville woman is being credited with helping bring down a man accused of exposing multiple women to HIV. It is a crime, a felony actually, to be intimate with someone without disclosing a positive HIV status.
Danny Perry II was in court last month, where he pleaded guilty to exposing a woman to HIV, a woman he played softball with for a Nashville rec league. A different woman took the stand during his court appearance. Marvelyn Brown says Perry exposed her to the potentially life-threatening virus 17 years ago, when she was just 19 years old.
I was 19 years old, he was 23, he had his own place, his own car, he looked good. My friends would meet him and they would say, you know, I really hope to find a man like yours one day. I was like, girl, you gotta leave them high school boys alone and get you, like a real man. And I mean, he was it. I remember one night we was about to have sex and we're kissing and things are getting hot and heavy, and then he stops and he says, baby, I just want you to know that, I don't have a condom. And if you want to move forward, I have no problem moving forward. He was it. This was my Prince Charming. So we proceeded to have sex that night without a condom. I grew up on all the Disney princess movies, and I always waited for my Prince Charming, and that's who he was to me. I mean, I'm thinking that those movies were so misleading. Which prince had HIV? And people oftentimes ask me, did he know he had HIV when you all had unprotected sex? And this is where my message of be responsible comes in, because I look at it like this. What if he had HIV and he didn't know because he never been tested like so many people living with HIV? I would still have HIV.
I'm going to go to the Daily Mail to read you guys the article and bring you guys up to speed. Shout out to my night owl who sent this in, and I appreciate when my night owls send me in, these little stories like this, because y'all know I like to dive in and speak on them. Okay, so on the site it says HIV positive Nashville softball player 41 is jailed for 6 years for having sex with dozens of women without telling them he was infected, as police appeal for more victims to come forward. An HIV positive man has been sentenced to 6 years in jail for exposing women by having sex with them without telling them he has the potentially life-threatening virus. Danny C. Perry II, 41, pleaded guilty last week in Nashville to HIV exposure and was sentenced to 6 years in prison for transmitting the incurable virus on September 30th. Davidson County Criminal Court Judge Steve Dozier found Perry guilty of a felony charge of criminal exposure of another to HIV and handed him the maximum jail time for the offense. Now, police prosecutors and 2 of Perry's victims are urging women who have had sex with Perry to get tested. Metro Police and the District Attorney's Office say they'd pursue additional charges against Perry if more of his sex partners comes forward. Perry was a warehouse worker living in Carthage, Tennessee, and was active in Nashville's adult softball league for years. Melby says there are likely dozens of women in Tennessee and other southern states who Perry exposed to HIV. A woman in his softball league pressed charges against Perry after she contracted HIV, and when she confronted him, he feigned surprise and said he had nothing troubling in his medical history. Prosecutors said Perry was married when he infected his softball league friend and didn't use a condom when having sex with the victim. The friend, who asked to not be identified in court documents, said Perry never told her he had HIV. In September of 2016, she called Perry to say she tested positive for HIV, and he feigned surprise and concern. In between multiple HIV tests, she asked Perry if there was anything he should tell her regarding his medical history, and he texted back no. However, an investigation showed Perry had received medical treatment for HIV since at least 2009, according to Detective Kevin Wiles of the Metro Police Sex Crimes. The victim discovered a series of private messages on Perry's Facebook account that revealed he had sex with as many as 19 women in the last 2 years, authorities said. He knowingly infected someone with HIV, knowing that he had it, knowing that he could prevent it by taking his medication and by using other forms of protection during their relationship, Melby said. And he still chose to be reckless with other people's lives. Perry's lawyer, Bobby Ballinger, and Perry apologized to the victim during the sentence hearing. At his sentence, one of Perry's ex-girlfriends, Marvelyn Brown of Nashville, testified saying he gave her HIV in 2003. Brown now lives in New York and is an HIV/AIDS activist who wrote the best-selling book The Naked Truth in 2008, in which she refers to the man who infected her as Prince Charming. They showed a post from the woman Melvin, and it says, "Today was the hardest day of my life. I had to give a witness testimony in the state of Tennessee versus Danny Perry, aka Prince Charming. I wore a red dress and lip because the AIDS awareness ribbon is red and I wanted to feel sexy and confident. I'm happy to report that he was given the max of 6 years and is a registered sex offender," his lawyer asked. Could he get 30 days to report to the judge? The judge said, "Not today. Danny Perry, F you. Don't drop the soap."
On her Facebook, she also added, "The detective on the case confirmed on the stand today that there were 19 confirmed cases of people that Danny Perry infected with HIV. Not a damn one would testify against him. Nashville and surrounding counties, we have to do better." These women are scared of stigma and discrimination. These women are scared of losing their job. Stop the stigma. HIV is not a crime, but intentionally infecting people is. Only one charge was brought against today. Come forward, please. So she's urging people to come forward and admit it, because it's only one woman who came forward who admitted that, and actually pressed charges against him. The reason why he was charged for the crime, but there was 19 women that they seen that he had slept with in the past 2 years alone. Melvin got infected in 2003, so she herself could not bring charges against him because her situation was out of the statute of limitations. But here is her story. She shared her story, and I just want you guys to take a listen to it, and I'll be back after that.
So I'm going to take you all back. As I laid in my bed on July 17th, 2003, I had been sick in the hospital for 2.5 weeks. The doctor did not know what was wrong with me. I had been given everything from a CT scan, an MRI, and a spinal tap, and the doctor still did not know anything. I had a fever of 106. I couldn't eat or use the bathroom on my own. They had basically given up hope. They called the preacher in, and they told my mom I had 24 hours to live. My mom had begun planning my funeral arrangements, and people was coming up to my hospital bed that I hadn't seen in years, saying their last goodbyes. But through the grace of God, I was stabilized and told I had pneumonia. So I laid in my hospital bed. There was a knock at the door, and it was the doctor. And I told him to come in. He said, "Marvin, I have something very serious to tell you." And I said, "Okay, am I pregnant?" Because at this time, I knew I had been tested for cancer and everything else. And I knew that I had had nights of unprotected sex. And what worse thing could a doctor tell me that could happen from sex other than pregnancy? And he looked at me and he said, "You're not pregnant. You're HIV positive." Growing up, my life was a blur. I was living for the moment and by the day. I was voted most athletic. I played every sport except tennis and golf. My best friend was prom queen. I made every party. I had every shoe, and I had all the clothes. HIV, to me, I put it on other people. I put it on gay men, IV drug users, prostitutes. I put it on anything other than me. I never thought I could have HIV, so it was the last thing on my mind. So as I sit there and the doctor told me that, I looked at him and I said, "I have AIDS and I'm gonna die." And he said, "No, you don't have AIDS and you're not going to die. At that moment, I knew whatever I had thought about HIV was untrue. All the misconceptions I had heard, all the myths, at that moment, it just didn't click. I wanted more information about HIV, so I began picking up the phone. The very first person I called was my best friend. And she told me that she was at work, and as soon as she get off work, she was gonna come and see me. So I called my next friend, who was 8 months pregnant at this time, and I was actually supposed to be the godmother of the child that she was carrying. And I said, I'm HIV positive. And she told me that she didn't want me to be the child's godmother, and she hung up the phone in my face. So I went on, and I called my sister, who was at work and was very nervous. Then I called my aunt, and then my mother. And once I got to my mother, she told me, do not tell anyone else anything. And if they truly want to know what's wrong with you, just tell them you had cancer. I didn't have to tell anyone anything else about me, because the day I found out I was HIV positive, my community of Nashville, Tennessee found out I was positive as well. My story just started to spread. People were coming up to my hospital just having to get a look and just to see if it was actually true of me having HIV. At this time, I still didn't know anything more than what I knew about HIV at first, which was absolutely nothing. Growing up, when I heard of HIV, I always heard STDs separately, so it never dawned on me that I can contract the virus sexually, because it was always STDs and HIV, and then you heard about hepatitis, and I'm thinking, well, if HIV was an STD, it would be in the same bracket as gonorrhea, chlamydia, and herpes, and all these things, and it wasn't true. So at this time, everyone was wondering, well, where did she get HIV from? And it was one day, I was supposed to go to work, and I decided not to go to work. I went to the park instead, and while I was at the park, I seen this guy, and he was really cute. And I just, started looking, really didn't think too much more about it until I seen him looking back. And I decided, well, I may have a chance with this person. So we began talking and exchanged numbers, and we started a relationship. He was 23 years old at the time, and I was only 19. He had his own place, his own car, he had a few jobs. I used to tell my friends about him, and they used to be like, oh, I'm kind of jealous, and all this other stuff. So I really thought, I was doing something. So it became one night, we were ready to have sex, and he told me he didn't have a condom. And at this time, I began thinking, he knew that I wasn't on birth control. So it meant he could see me as his baby mother. I felt special. When he told me he loved me, it meant I loved myself even more, just because he loved me. It made me just feel special and honored that he wanted to do all these things. So I proceeded to have sex with him without a condom. And it took me 3 weeks later to be in the hospital, sick with pneumonia. So I picked up the phone and I called him, and I let him know that I was HIV positive. And he told me that he was sorry. So once I got out the hospital, I started living my life. Not necessarily living, I was basically waiting to die. I had given up hope on myself because I had experienced stigma already, and I wasn't even positive for more than a week. I went back to school where I was forced to just drop out, because every time I went somewhere, people would point and laugh and say, oh my God, that's the girl with HIV. I was scared to go around my family because when I was around them, I was forced to eat off paper plates, plastic silverwares. I had to wash my clothes separately. No one really understood what HIV was. I was shunned out of my church. They didn't want me there because I was HIV positive, and they always wanted to put fornication and the devil in the same sentence that they put HIV in. So at this time, I started living in my car. I was homeless. I didn't know where to go, who to turn. I just waited to die. I even went to Walmart and I said, I'm gonna take a obituary picture, because if I'm gonna die, I want the cover of my obituary to look good. So I went and I took the picture. And one day when I was driving home in my car, my home was the Walmart parking lot, by the way. As I was driving home, I looked up and I seen brake lights. And once I seen these brake lights, I barely jerked the wheel to the left. And I remember losing control of the car. And the car spins across 4 lanes of traffic. And it turned completely around and it faced the oncoming traffic. A tractor trailer was heading my way full speed. And I seen the tractor trailer hit its brake and smoke start coming up on both sides. And I just looked and I was just like, oh man, I'm about to die. So I just closed my eyes. And when I opened them, the tractor trailer was inches away from the front of my car. And I was just like, wow. At that moment, it didn't even dawn on me that I had almost died and it had absolutely nothing to do with HIV. I didn't realize it till I got home. And I realized how much time, at this time it had been 6 months, me living with HIV, looking in the mirror, waiting to die. Facing stigma, like all these things, it just didn't settle. And so I realized that I had wasted too much time out of my life, that I was still somebody with or without HIV. So I wanted to get myself together. So I went out and I got me a job, which eventually let me have a place of my own. And I started speaking out about HIV and AIDS. I decided to put my story in the Tennessean and spread my message. At this time, I didn't want anything big to come out of it. I just wanted to let the people know in my Nashville community that it was real, because I hadn't owned up to it at this point. If I seen somebody and they said, oh, I heard you have HIV, I didn't accept it. I was just like, oh, then I don't know what they're talking about, and I didn't own it. So I said, I'm gonna put it in the paper and I'm gonna show people that this is true and that this happened to me and that it could happen to them. And so at this time, when I put it in there, I didn't know what to expect. And I received getting letters and phone calls from people who were living with HIV in Tennessee, and for that matter, all over the country, because news had broke that someone my age, I was 20 years old at the time, who came out and started sharing their story. So from that moment, things just started happening, and I became an HIV activist. It was something that I found comfort in doing. And when I always come out and share my story, I try to leave people with 3 very important messages. I always tell them to get tested, because I never would have gotten tested for HIV. When I found out I was positive, the thing that shocked me the most was that the H in HIV stood for human. I thought it stood for heroin user, homosexual, just anything I wasn't. And that shocked me. And so I never would have gotten tested. I was better than HIV. It was too much stuff going on in my life that I was not concerned about that. I wasn't concerned. So I tell people to get tested, because now I've been living with HIV for 5 years. And the most scary part about it would be not knowing that I was HIV positive, because in this case, it's better to know your status than not to know. Not only about the people I would have infected, but the virus would have multiplied in my body to the point I probably would have found out when I had full-blown AIDS. And I always tell people to be responsible. And the reason why I tell people to be responsible is because what if I tell you that the guy who infected me, the reason why he told me he was sorry is because he knew he had it when he gave it to me. It still didn't change the simple fact that I had a choice. I was not raped. I chose to get HIV. They talked about HIV being a preventable disease. I made a choice that now I have to live with the rest of my life. And I had a choice, so I have to live with that. I have to live with the choices that I made. And looking back on it, I don't like to admit it, but my self-esteem was shot. I didn't have any self-love, because if I had so much self-love, why did I give him the power to decide my future and my life? Why didn't I have more control over the situation? I didn't love myself. And I always tell people to get educated, because the girl who I was supposed to be the godmother of her child. She couldn't see that we both had sex. She had sex and got pregnant. I had sex and got HIV. Our roles could have easily been reversed, or easily one of us could have got both. Because people do find out they're HIV positive and pregnant, HIV positive and hepatitis. Just because you have HIV or one or the other it doesn't eliminate you from anything else. And nowadays, I live a normal, regular life. I have a boyfriend. I'm very happy. I see marriage and kids in my future. I have an autobiography coming out. I just won an Emmy. Thank you. I have done a lot, and I'm very happy that HIV has been my teacher. It really has. HIV has taught me self-love and self-respect, but HIV doesn't have to be your teacher. My life is great, but I'm telling you, HIV is the disease that you don't want. You don't want it. Every day, I take 8 horse pills that make me sick to my stomach. I experience everything from vomiting, diarrhea, and nausea. They make me sick. And even though the medicines are pretty bad, the worst thing about having HIV is the stigma that I face on a day-to-day basis, even to today. From people who don't believe that HIV can happen to them, that HIV is a joke. HIV is very, very real. And I'm here to tell you that if it happens to me, it can happen to you. But if you do have HIV, doesn't mean that your life cannot go on.
Anybody who has come in contact with Danny Perry, he has been infecting women as early as 2003. This woman who came forward, Melvin Brown, said that he infected her in 2003. And he has documented records that he was getting treated in 2009. And all of this could be prevented to a certain degree. They have medication nowadays that if you are infected with this, I think PrEP is for people who don't have it, but they want to prevent having it. But I believe people who do have it, they have medication that will lower their levels so much to where it will be hard for them to transmit it to somebody else. And obviously, he's not taking the proper medication and willfully infecting other women. So anybody in the Nashville area, if you have came in contact with Danny Perry, if you know any woman who has came in contact with him sexually, he is HIV positive, and they might want to get tested for it for the sake of their prolonged life thereafter. That's all for this video. Stay tuned for more celebrity news and gossip. If you have not subscribed to my channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button right now. Don't wait, but do it right now. And I'll see you guys on the next video. But also make sure to check out my website and all my links down below. I have a second channel that's not celebrity related. I have my Instagram, my Facebook, and again, I'm going to say my website. So check out those things down below. And I appreciate it so much. All right, guys.